Most people will work for 40 years and still won't have enough to retire. But what if I told you that 10 years is all you need? And no, you don't need to win the lottery or inherit money from a rich uncle. Stay with me because what I'm about to show you will completely change how you think about money. Here's the thing, we've all been sold this idea that retirement happens at 65. Work hard, save a little, and hope you have enough when you're too old to enjoy it. But there's a different path. A path where you can actually retire in your 30s or 40s. And it's not some get-rich-quick scheme. It's math. Pure, simple math. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how someone can go from zero to financially independent in just 10 years. We're talking real numbers, real strategies, and real risks you need to know about. Let me paint you a picture. You're 25 years old. Maybe you just graduated college. Maybe you've been working for a couple years. You look at your bank account and see maybe a few $1,000s if you're lucky. Your friends are buying new cars, going on expensive vacations, upgrading their apartments. Meanwhile, you're wondering how you'll ever afford a house, let alone retire early. The average person in their 20s has less than $10,000 saved. And here's the scary part. Most people will keep living paycheck to paycheck for decades. They'll get small raises, buy slightly nicer things, and stay on that hamster wheel until they're in their 60s. Then they'll realize they need to work another 5 or 10 years because they don't have enough saved. But here's what nobody tells you. The biggest advantage you have when you're young isn't your energy or your time. It's something called compound interest. And if you understand how to use it, you can completely flip the script on traditional retirement. The real problem isn't that people don't make enough money. Sure, income matters, but that's not the core issue. The real problem is that nobody teaches us how money actually grows. We're taught to save, but not how to invest. We're told to work hard, but not how to make our money work harder than we do. Think about it this way. If you save $1,000 under your mattress every month for 10 years, you'll have $120,000. That sounds pretty good, right? Wrong, because inflation is eating away at that money. What costs $100 today might cost $130 in 10 years. Your money is actually losing value while it sits there. But if you take that same $1,000 and invest it properly, something magical happens. And I'm going to show you exactly what that looks like with real numbers. Let's start with the basics. To retire in 10 years, you need to answer one critical question. How much money do you actually need? And this is where most people get it completely wrong. There's this rule in the financial independence community called the 4% rule. Here's how it works. Whatever amount you can safely withdraw 4% of each year without running out of money is your target number. So if you need $40,000 a year to live on, you need $1 million invested, because 4% of 1 million is 40,000. Now, before you close this video thinking $1 million is impossible, stick with me, because I'm going to show you it's more achievable than you think. But we need to be realistic about what it takes. Let's create a model. We'll call our person Sarah. Sarah is 25 years old. She makes $50,000 a year after taxes. That's not a crazy high income. That's actually pretty average for someone with a college degree in many cities. Sarah wants to retire at 35. That gives her exactly 10 years. Here's where it gets interesting. Sarah can't just save a little bit and hope for the best. To hit financial independence in 10 years, she needs to be aggressive, really aggressive. She needs to save and invest at least 50% of her income. I know that sounds insane, but let me show you why it works. If Sarah saves $25,000 a year and invests it in the stock market, and if the market gives her an average return of 7% per year after inflation, here's what happens. Year 1, she invests $25,000. By the end of that year, she has about $26,750. Not a huge difference, right? But watch what happens over time. Year 2, she adds another $25,000. Now she's got $51,000 plus growth. Year 3, another $25,000. But now the money she invested in year 1 has been growing for 3 years. The money from year 2 has been growing for 2 years. This is compound interest in action. By year 5, Sarah has invested $125,000 of her own money. But her account balance isn't $125,000. It's about $144,000. That extra $19,000, That's her money making money. By year 10, Sarah has personally put in $250,000, but her account balance is now around $345,000. That's almost $100,000 in growth. Free money. Money she didn't have to work for. Money that worked for her while she slept. Now, $345,000 isn't quite enough to retire on if Sarah needs $40,000 a year. Used by the 4% rule, she could only safely withdraw about $13,800 a year. So what's missing? This is where the savings rate becomes critical. If Sarah can push her savings rate higher, maybe to 60 or even 70%, the math changes dramatically. Let's say Sarah finds ways to cut her expenses and increases her savings to $35,000 a year instead of $25,000. With $35,000 saved and invested each year at 7% returns, after 10 years, Sarah would have about $483,000. Getting closer. At 75% savings rate, putting away $37,500 a year, she'd have about $517,000 after 10 years. But here's the secret sauce that makes this whole thing work. Sarah doesn't just save more, she also focuses on increasing her income. This is crucial. If Sarah can grow her income from $50,000 to $75,000 over those 10 years through job changes, promotions, or side hustles, and she keeps her expenses roughly the same, she can dramatically increase how much she's investing. Let's run a more aggressive scenario. Sarah starts at $50,000 after taxes. She keeps her living expenses at $25,000 a year. That's her baseline. Every raise, every extra dollar earned goes straight to investments. Year 1 through 3, she's making $50,000 and investing $25,000. Years 4 through 6, she's up to $60,000 and now investing $35,000. Years 7 through 10, she's at $75,000 and investing $50,000 a year. With this progressive model, Sarah would end up with around $650,000 after 10 years. Using the 4% rule, that gives her $26,000 a year to live on. Combined with some part-time work or side income of just $15,000 to $20,000 a year, Sarah is now financially independent. She doesn't need a full-time job anymore. She has options. She has freedom. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Can someone actually live on $25,000 a year? And the answer is, it depends on where you live. In San Francisco or New York City? Probably not. But in many cities across America, and definitely in lower cost of living countries? Absolutely. $25,000 a year is about $2,000 a month. With a roommate or in a smaller apartment, you might pay $800 for rent, another $400 for food if you cook at home, $100 for utilities, maybe $200 for transportation if you use public transit or have a paid-off car, another $300 for health insurance through a high-deductible plan. That leaves you $200 a month for everything else: entertainment, clothes, personal care, savings for emergencies. It's tight. I'm not gonna lie to you. This is not a luxurious lifestyle. You're not eating out every night. You're not buying the latest iPhone every year. You're not taking expensive vacations. But here's what you need to understand. This is temporary. 10 years of living below your means in exchange for 50+ years of financial freedom. That's the trade-off. And here's something else most people don't consider. As your investment portfolio grows, you can start to relax a little. In years 8, 9, and 10, when you're getting close to your goal, you might allow yourself a bit more spending because you can see the finish line. Now let's talk about the investment strategy itself, because this is where people make huge mistakes. You cannot just put your money in a savings account and expect this to work. Savings accounts right now are paying maybe 4 or 5% if you're lucky, and that barely keeps up with inflation. You need to invest in assets that actually grow. For most people, that means the stock market, specifically low-cost index funds. An index fund is basically a basket of stocks that tracks the overall market. Instead of trying to pick individual winning stocks, which is really hard and really risky, you buy a little piece of hundreds or thousands of companies. The most popular is an S&P 500 index fund, which includes the 500 largest companies in America. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Google. Over the long term, the stock market has returned about 10% per year on average before inflation, or about 7% after accounting for inflation. That 7% is what we've been using in our calculations, and it's a reasonable estimate based on historical data. But, and this is a big but, the stock market doesn't go up in a straight line. Some years it's up 20%, other years it's down 20%. The 7% average only works if you stay invested for the long term and don't panic sell when things get scary. This brings us to risk. And this is the part that most personal finance content glosses over because it's not sexy or exciting, but you need to hear it. The biggest risk to this 10-year retirement plan isn't that you can't save enough or that you won't stay disciplined. The biggest risk is sequence of returns. That's a fancy way of saying when you get good years versus bad years in the stock market really matters. Imagine Sarah follows the plan perfectly. She saves aggressively, invests consistently, lives frugally. But in years 8 and 9 of her plan, the stock market crashes. Not just a small dip, but a real crash like 2008 or 2020, where the market drops 30 or 40%. Suddenly, Sarah's portfolio that was on track to hit $650,000 is now sitting at $400,000. She's lost years of progress. This is the nightmare scenario, and it's a real possibility you have to prepare for. So how do you protect against this? A few ways. First, as you get closer to your 10-year goal, you start shifting some of your investments from stocks to bonds or other safer assets. Bonds don't grow as fast, but they don't drop as hard during market crashes. Maybe in years 1 through 7, you're 100% stocks, but in years 8 through 10, you move to 80% stocks and 20% bonds, then 70-30, then 60-40. Second, you build flexibility into your plan. Maybe instead of a hard retirement at year 10, you're aiming for financial independence, but willing to do some part-time work if the market isn't cooperating. This is actually what most people in the financial independence community do anyway. They don't fully retire. They just transition to work they actually enjoy without worrying about the paycheck. Third, you can extend your timeline if needed. If year 8 or 9 has a market crash, maybe you work another 2 years to let your portfolio recover. It's not the original plan, but 12 years to financial independence is still way better than 40. Here's the reality check moment. This 10-year retirement plan is possible, but it's not easy. It requires discipline that most people don't have. It requires sacrifice that most people aren't willing to make. You're going to watch your friends go on trips you can't afford. You're going to drive an older car while they're leasing new ones. You're going to stay in a small apartment while they're buying houses they can barely afford. And you know what? Some of them are going to judge you. They're going to think you're crazy or cheap or missing out on life. But here's what they don't understand. You're not missing out. You're playing a different game. A game where you win by opting out of the race they're stuck in. The people who successfully retire early all have one thing in common. They stop caring what other people think about their lifestyle. They stop trying to keep up with everyone else. They realize that the fancy car and the big house are just expensive distractions that keep you working longer. There's this concept in the financial independence community called the hedonic treadmill. It means that no matter how much money you make or how nice your stuff is, you adapt to it and want more. The person making $40,000 thinks they'll be happy at $60,000. The person making $60,000 thinks they need $80,000. The person making $200,000 thinks they need $300,000. It never ends unless you consciously step off the treadmill. The 10-year retirement plan forces you to step off. It makes you realize that happiness doesn't come from stuff. It comes from freedom, from having options, from not being forced to stay in a job you hate because you need the paycheck. So can you really retire in 10 years? Yes, but with some big caveats. You need a decent income to start with. Not a crazy high income, but something in the $40,000 to $60,000 range after taxes at minimum. You need to be willing to live on 50% or less of that income. You need to invest the rest consistently in the stock market. You need to avoid lifestyle inflation as your income grows. And you need to be prepared for market volatility and have backup plans if things don't go perfectly. This isn't financial advice for everyone. If you have kids, if you have major health issues, if you're supporting family members, the math gets a lot more complicated. But for a single person or a couple without major financial obligations, it's absolutely doable. The real question isn't whether it's possible. The real question is whether you want it badly enough to make the sacrifices required. Because make no mistake, you will sacrifice. You'll sacrifice the new car for a used one. You'll sacrifice eating out for cooking at home. You'll sacrifice keeping up appearances for building real wealth. But in exchange, you get something most people never get. You get your time back. You get to spend your 30s and 40s and beyond doing what you actually want to do, not what you have to do to pay bills. Maybe that's traveling the world. Maybe that's starting a business you're passionate about without worrying about the income. Maybe that's just having the option to take a year off and figure out what you really want from life. The traditional path is safe and predictable. Work for 40 years, save a little, retire at 65, and hope you have enough time and health left to enjoy it. The early retirement path is harder up front, but gives you decades of freedom on the back end. And here's something most people don't realize. Once you hit financial independence, you can still work if you want to. But it's different when you're working because you choose to, not because you have to. That shift in mindset changes everything. Your job becomes something you do because you enjoy it or find it meaningful, not something you're trapped in. The 10-year retirement plan is really just a framework. Some people will do it in 8 years. Some will take 12 or 15. The exact timeline doesn't matter as much as the principle behind it. The principle that you can design your life differently than everyone else. That you can prioritize freedom over stuff. That you can make your money work for you instead of working for money your whole life. If you're sitting there thinking, this sounds impossible, I get it. It sounds extreme because it is extreme. But extreme problems require extreme solutions. And the problem of spending the majority of your waking hours for 40+ years doing something you don't love just to survive is a pretty extreme problem when you think about it. Start small. You don't have to go from saving nothing to saving 50% overnight. Start with 10%, then 15, then 20. As you prove to yourself that you can live on less, you'll find it easier to cut more. And as you watch your investment account grow, you'll get addicted to seeing that number go up. That becomes more exciting than buying stuff. Track your net worth monthly. Watch it grow. Celebrate the milestones. First 10,000, then 50,000, then 100,000. That first 100,000 is the hardest because it takes the longest. But after that, compound interest really kicks in and the growth accelerates. Find other people on the same path. The financial independence community online is huge and supportive. When your real-life friends don't understand why you're living the way you are, your online community will get it. They'll celebrate your wins with you and encourage you when it gets hard. And it will get hard. There will be moments when you want to give up, when you want to just be normal and spend money like everyone else. In those moments, remind yourself why you started. Picture yourself in 10 years, financially free, waking up without an alarm, spending your days however you choose. That future version of you is counting on you to stay disciplined. This is your life. You can follow the path everyone else is on, or you can create your own. Retiring in 10 years isn't a fantasy, it's a choice. A choice to live differently, a choice to prioritize differently, a choice to value time over things. If this changed how you think about money and retirement, subscribe for more content like this.